I've been excited for Clair Obscur Expedition 33 since last year. Not to be a French JRPG hipster or anything, but this game was kind of on my radar before it was cool. Which is why in the months leading up to release, I was hyperanalyzing every detail of every trailer, hitting the history books, and taking a couple trips to the Art Institute of Chicago to fully understand the plot possibilities of this game. Tying together how the life of real Renoir could maybe give us a little insight into Andy Serkis's Renoir in Expedition 33. It turns out I was semi-wrong. But semi-right! There are a ton of art history details that did make it into the game, and they go far beyond just Renoir and his life. Art history drives this game's abundant plot twists and turns, which I will happily detail for you in this video. So let's do it. Allow me to explain the plot of Clair Obscur Expedition 33, which is complex and confusing in all the right JRPG ways. Along the way, I'll enlighten you with all the juicy art history details hidden in the seams and driving that plot forward. And a quick disclaimer. I haven't yet completed this game's plentiful side content, because I wanted to get through the main story without getting spoiled. But I will, of course, take my time and go back and do all that side stuff, because I've heard it's excellent. I gotta track down someone named Simon, fight the big pink noodle in the sky, maybe even crack 5 million damage with Mael, Standhall nerf be damned. So this is your spoiler warning for Clair Obscur Expedition 33. If you haven't played it yet, get out of here and go play it, and then come back and watch this. Okay. Let's begin. Plot first, and then I'll go all art history on your ass. The game's prologue starts in Lumiere, prior to the 33rd expedition, but I'm not gonna start there. I'm gonna tell you the story chronologically, so let's rewind. This game actually starts in Belle Epoque, Paris, back in the early 1900s. The Descendre family lives in this gorgeous mansion with gardens looking out over the Eiffel Tower. They are definitely a family of wealth and power, perhaps due to the fact that they are capital P painters. These are people with the ability to paint entire worlds into a canvas and then hop in, like Super Mario 64 style kinda. The matriarch of this family is named Aline, and she's married to Renoir. And I know I said art history is going after the plot, but already we have our first IRL connection. This is the real Aline, who in real life was married to Pierre-Auguste Renoir, the, famous impressionist painter. In the real world, Renoir also lived in Belle Epoque, Paris. For a deep dive into his life with a little Expedition 33 lens, go watch that other video. But for now, in real life, Aline was one of Renoir's models, but in Expedition 33, she is the one who taught him to paint, and paint responsibly. She cautions him against the dangers of getting too obsessed with a canvas and losing yourself in it. Which, that's an important note for later. They have 3 children who they also teach to capital P paint. The oldest is Clea, Verso's in the middle, and Alicia is the youngest. Growing up, the kids paint their own worlds. Verso in particular paints this canvas where he creatively reimagines his pets as personality-filled sentient puppet creatures called gestrels. And also his stuffed animals as, whatever Esquier is. It seems like Clea is a frequent visitor to Verso's canvas back in the day. And Esquier's buddy, Francois, even talks about missing her when Expedition 33 comes through. Clea has this line about Alicia keeping to herself back when they were kids, staying in her room and reading her books, which is particularly important when you consider the core inciting conflict in the story. Just like there are capital P painters, there are capital W writers. We don't know much about them, but we just know that the two parties are at war. So Alicia is alone, kind of isolated, as her other 2 siblings are enjoying these painted worlds, and she's reading books, perhaps written by writers. Whether that's the case or not, the writers somehow end up tricking her seemingly and use her as bait. What goes down next isn't exactly super clear, but the writers are able to gain access to the painter's mansion and they set it ablaze. Alicia is horribly burned in the process, and Verso fucking dies trying to save her. To put it lightly, the event tears the Descendre family apart. Alicia, badly burned and in terrible chronic pain, loses an eyeball and can't really even speak anymore. Clea embarks on a militant mission to end the writer-painter war. And wrought by grief, Aline falls in the very pitfall that she warned her husband about. She becomes obsessed with Verso's canvas, the one with Esquier and the gestrels. Clinging to this vision of what her family used to be, she repaints her family members into Verso's canvas, creating this strange, shadowy duplicate family. This leads to her fleshing out a fully detailed life in the canvas, complete with other humans and a beautiful French town. That's right, this is how Lumiere comes to be. Renoir grows increasingly worried for Aline, and rightfully so. Staying in the canvas this long takes a very intense physical toll on her body. So he goes in to get her out. But she won't listen to reason, presumably, so he just starts erasing her creations. And what's a French word for erase? Oh yeah, gommage! So Aline freaks that Renoir is gommaging her precious creations and imprisons him underneath a big-ass rock. The monolith. It seems like it's this action that incites the fracture, a huge burst of energy that splits apart the continent. From then on each year, Renoir tries to gommage everyone in Lumiere from beneath the monolith, and Aline tries to stop him. As her power weakened, she could protect fewer people, really only able to protect the youngest of Lumiere's population. As a warning, she had her giant paintress kaiju paint a kind of countdown on the monolith, signaling who would be erased. She loved the people of Lumiere. She created them and she wanted to protect them. But the people of Lumiere didn't know that. They thought the paintress was evil and that she was painting death, because all they saw was big lady paints number, people die. So they started sending out expeditions to go get rid of her. Back in the real world, Clea sees that her parents are in a kind of stalemate, so she hops in to go help her dad. After all, she wants him out of the painting so he can help her fight the war against the writers. To kind of tip the scales in Renoir's favor, Clea creates these dudes, the Nevrons. To understand why Nevrons are important, we first gotta understand a little bit about Aline and how she paints. To paint someone into existence, Aline uses chroma. Yeah, like the game's currency. It's this kind of life energy that floats around and exists inside living things in the painting. When Renoir would gommage people, their chroma would be released back into the world, and Aline could recapture it and paint more people or use her power to keep Renoir at bay. Enter Clea's Nevrons. People killed by Nevrons turn into these statue thingies, which I'm sure you've seen all throughout your playthrough. They're probably fine, right? When that happens, their chroma stays trapped inside. Aline can't recapture it, so with every person the Nevrons killed, her chroma pool shrunk and shrunk. Also, at some point, Renoir creates the Axons to continue the battle against Aline. Back in the real world again, I'm getting out of breath. Alicia also wants to help Renoir and Clea. She hops in the canvas, but she's not really strong enough to hold her own, and Aline paints over her. She's reborn as a baby in Lumiere in Monolith Year 47, and her parents name her Maëlle. Fast forward 16 years, at least inside the painting, because I think painting time passes faster than real life time, but 16 years later, we've got the start of the game's prologue. We got Gustave and Sophie and Maëlle, who has no idea that she's actually a paintress named Alicia. Gustave yearns, Aline paints 33, Sophie goes poof, and Expedition 33 sets out on their journey. When they hit the beach, Nicki Minaj. When they hit the beach, Renoir meets them and fucks shit up. But important to note here that this is painted Renoir, this sort of malicious doppelganger created by Aline. The real one is still under the monolith, and his husk is the curator, which we'll meet very soon. So when painted Renoir is like mass murdering everyone, Verso is also there lurking, and he actually pulls Maëlle to safety because he knows she's looks a lot like Alicia. Maëlle ends up at the manor with the curator, the husk of real Renoir, and he looks after her. He upgrades her pictos. And eventually he wants to tag along to camp, presumably to continue keeping an eye on her. The rest of the plot continues to churn. We meet Lune, Ciel, Esquier, a whole mess of gestrels. But then, after a particularly dope-ass boss fight, the unthinkable happens. Evil painted Renoir, and you can tell he's evil because his suit is black. He murders Gustave right in front of Maëlle. Verso is there too, fucking lurking, and he just lets it happen. He knows if Maëlle sees evil Renoir kill Gustave, then she'll join him in trying to get rid of painted Renoir, who is just an Aline crony, and then help him get rid of Aline herself. And wait. Who is this again? I thought Verso died. Oh, this is Painted Verso. He was created by Aline, but there's also little kid Verso, who's like the true soul of Verso, being forced to toil and keep the canvas alive. Painted Verso knows this, at least on some level, and he knows his soul's being used and twisted and tortured to keep everyone in the canvas alive. Which is why he wants to kill Painted Renoir and Aline. You know, force her out of the painting, back into the real world long enough for the real Renoir, say that five times fast. Long enough for the real Renoir to erase the canvas and let him rest. This shit gets complicated, dude. Anyway, Verso teams up with Mael, Ciel, and Lune to go kill the Paintress. They knock out a couple of Axons on the way to get tools for the job, and they finally arrive at the monolith. They can't hurt Aline's very, very sad, but very, very cool Paintress kaiju, so they go inside the monolith, which is this strange mirror world littered with Aline's memories. We learn more about who she is, how she taught her kids to paint, and how her relationship with Renoir was kind of falling apart. At the top, they fight her and win. Note to self, when trying to save the world, bring a bisexual queen, a studious lesbian, their daughter, and her 2 gay uncles. They go back to Lumiere and celebrate. And as Verso reads a letter from Painted Alicia, which basically says, dude, you killed the Paintress, now we're gonna get erased. That's exactly what happens. Without Aline standing against Renoir, he fucking gamages everyone. It's at this point that Mael realizes who she is, that she's Alicia, and she remembers the 16 years she lived before the 16 years she lived in the painting. She learns she's a paintress herself, and so is her dad, Renoir. Speaking of, Renoir finally escapes the monolith after 67 years and zips over to Lumiere to talk to Verso and Mael. She wants him to restore Lumiere, and he's like, no bitch, I just got rid of it. You gotta go home because I'm gonna torch this fucking canvas. They panic and they ride Esquier to safety. Back at camp, Mael harnesses her true paintress skills and repaints Ciel and Lune. I do think it's important to note here that these repainted versions aren't just shadows or puppets. They're truly sentient human beings. Ciel tells the story of losing her child and then realizes that Esquier was the one who saved her when she was drowning. You know, all that happened after she was repainted. Those are things that Mael would never know. At least in my mind, that's evidence that painted people, whether repainted or not, are independent and sentient, not just mere puppets of the one who painted them. And after all, why would Aline paint people who just were so vehemently out to go kill her? Anyway, Mael wants to stop Renoir from torching the painting and killing basically everyone she loves. Plus, with Renoir out of the picture, literally, she could harness all the chroma he was using and use it to repaint everyone. Gustave, Sophie, Ciel's husband, the whole squad. So for a little extra manpower, Mael goes and grabs that chroma locked inside the expeditioners by the Nevrons. She then lands at Lumiere and uses that chroma to unleash this ghostly expeditioner army like she's Aragorn with the dead men of Dunharrow. What is this, Helm's Deep? In probably the most epic sequence of the game, the party traverses war-torn Lumiere and rushes towards Renoir. This is also when they pick up the most important journal, Expedition 60. Is this the naked one? You know, the naked expedition. If you know, you know. But anyway, they make it all the way to Renoir, they tussle, a kaiju battle ensues, and Mael literally stabs her dad through the heart. And then they hash it out again. She's like, Dad, listen, cool your jets, okay? Everything's fine. And he's like, kiddo, I'm torching it. And he also says, like, look at your mom. This is probably gonna be you too. You're gonna get stuck in here. And she's like, Dad, stay in here forever, just like a little bit longer, please. And he's like, seems sus, but okay. Verso is lurking again, and he's like, dude? And he hops in this portal thing to the edge of creation. 33 seconds till the end. Time enough, pour vous, perhaps. No, sorry, wrong game. I mean, they go to this place that's like the heart of the canvas, where little kid Verso, like his soul, is toiling away, painting, you know, keeping the whole canvas alive. Verso's like, bro, give it to me straight. Do you want to keep doing this? And little kid is like, Mael shows up right when Verso's about to free himself from the torture of being forced to keep all the lights on in the canvas, and she stops him. Basically, this whole exchange is like,
I'm tired of this, Grandpa.
That's too damn bad!
and then we as the player are faced with the decision of gut-wrenching near automata proportions. Do you side with Mael, forcing Verso to stay alive forever and essentially torture him in order to save all of the people you love from death? Or do you side with Verso, ending the lives of everyone you love and erasing their homes, but freeing Verso's soul and allowing Mael and her family to grieve and move on? It's complicated, and I think helping a family to move on and process their grief while allowing Verso to rest seems like the right choice. But I could never condone killing clearly sentient human beings against their will. Even in his own journal, Verso says, we deserve to exist, we deserve to live. It is super complicated, and I'd love to hear your guys' choices and thought processes and all that in the comments. In Mael's ending, you see a clearly distressed Verso being forced to play out Mael's fantasy of his opera house piano performance. Gustav and Sophie are there, but it feels really unnerving. It kind of feels like Mael is having her cake and eating it too. There are these intense cinematic cuts, and we see Mael be truly consumed by the painting, just like her mother. She is the new paintress. In Verso's ending, you see Verso's funeral. The Dissandra family is together again outside the canvas, which has presumably been destroyed. I want to think that this is the more happy, optimistic ending, but with the way that Mael, or Alicia, is left at the gravesite alone at the end of this cutscene, I really am not sure. It's kind of unclear whether or not she's reconciled with her family and whether they are like unified again. Also, do you remember the 33rd of December? I don't know what's up with that. I couldn't find any historical record of a 33rd of December in some weird calendar, but I do wonder if maybe it's a nod to the fact that they're in another fabricated world. Maybe another canvas, maybe a story written by a writer. I don't know, but kind of a fun idea. Woo! So that's the plot. Simple enough, right? But where's all the art history? Let's dive in. Once again, let's start with the name, Clair Obscur. Like I mentioned in the last video, it means chiaroscuro, which is a painting technique that uses mega intense contrast and shadows and bright light to create maximum drama, dimension, and realism. Artists like Caravaggio and Da Vinci were big chiaroscuro guys. Before I played the game, I thought Clair Obscur might be hinting towards a strong sense of light and dark, good and evil. Of course, this game is never that simple. No one really feels truly good or evil, but it does play with duality a lot, like the painted Renoir versus the real one, and painted Alicia and Mael, or the duality of Aline existing at the top of the monolith where things are bright, and Renoir being at the bottom where things are dark. Even more on the nose are those two Nevrons named Clair and Obscur, which have dark and light color schemes. But instead of thinking about what Clair Obscur is, let's think about what Clair Obscur does. Da Vinci especially used intense clair-obscur shadows to more precisely illustrate the exact proportions of figures in his paintings. He used it to attain realism. That's the opposite of what painters like Renoir did. Impressionist paintings neglect traditional black shadows as a whole, and instead use color to depict depth. Impressionism is about capturing a fleeting emotional moment in time, oftentimes with a focus on beauty and leisure and love and dope-ass landscapes. And realism is about capturing, well, reality as close as possible. Verso's canvas to me feels very impressionist. Maybe not in style, but definitely in vibe. He reimagined parts of his life that he loved, like his plushies and his pets, and dropped them into a world with more than a few dope-ass landscapes. It was an escape for him, a beautiful world different from his own reality, where he could go and be surrounded by stuff that made him happy. Yo, is that your baguette, or are you just happy to see me? Things really only started to go awry when Aline showed up and started painting real-ass humans into his canvas. Something that definitely wasn't there before. So when Aline tries to recreate something very real, like a one-to-one recreation of her family, and use it as an unhealthy coping mechanism for her grief, well, That's not good for anybody. In fact, it's very bad for everybody. Her realism even comes full circle all the way back around to chiaroscuro with how she paints her version of Alicia. Painted Alicia is notably only in black and white, high contrast, high shadow, clair obscur. And I think that this is probably because she still harbors a little bit of resentment towards her for being the one that Verso sacrificed his life to save. And not only does she paint her without color, which maybe means painting with less love or emotion, she also paints a version of her after the fire when Alicia is in pain and can't speak. When she paints Verso, he's basically indistinguishable from the real deal, as far as we know. Full of color and life. And then there's Mael's ending. Verso's concert scene at the end is shot entirely in that high contrast black and white, light and dark. They went full clair obscur mode. And here it seems like they're referencing chiaroscuro as it's used in film instead of how it's used in paintings. After all, it's been used in film basically since film was a thing. And it's in this style that we see Mael become physically obsessed with the canvas just like her mother. We see her become the new paintress, the new master of realism. Because she too used her power to paint real people she had lost and bring them back to life instead of accepting her grief and loss, moving on and growing as a person. So maybe the moral of the story here is, they're using clair obscur to paint a hyper-realistic version of your family to cling to instead of facing the real world and processing your grief. That's bad. Just stick to good old French Impressionism, guys. We could have avoided all of this. Here are some other delicious little morsels I found aside from this heavy hitting stuff. First, the sky often looks like blobs of oil paint because they're literally in an oil painting. That's also why they refer to their blood as ink. So obvious in hindsight. Stendhal is a Mael attack so powerful, they simply had to nerf it. But Stendhal is also a French writer known mostly for his works in literary realism. His most famous work is Le Rouge et le Noir, or The Red and the Black. It's a novel about a man and his life in France during the reign of Napoleon and how France's social structure changed after the revolution. But yeah, more evidence that clinging to realism too hard is something that Mael knows about all too well. We talked a lot about Impressionism today and chiaroscuro stuff, but this game's art influences go far beyond that. Like this stuff from a Polish horror artist whose name I dare not say because I cannot pronounce it. The faceless humans, the large creatures in these surreal landscapes, and even colossal rock structures. It's hard to deny his influence. I'm sure that Sandfall put a lot of other art influences in this game, so let me know the ones I missed. This weapon from Minoko is called the Bucharo, and I think it's a reference to a kind of ceramic art called Buchero. The Etruscans made this stuff back in pre-Roman Italy, circa like 6th century BCE. People who made these reduced the oxygen in the kiln where they fired them so they would get this beautiful deep black color. Kind of like one half of clair obscur. Also, I just wanted to bring this up because jars and ceramic pots are so central to gestural culture. When gestrels die, they are planted in one of these little pots and then, put in the ground near the sacred river and then they're reborn. So it's kind of neat. Speaking of gestrels, Minoko and Verso spoon, and Verso is canonically the little spoon.
Little spoon. Obviously.
Oh, that doesn't have any art history relevance. It just has personal relevance because I care about it a lot. Anyway, that's all I got. Short video, I know. I didn't have very much to say. Let me know what stuff you found that I missed. And if I do the side stuff and I find more stuff that matters to the lore and it deserves a whole other video, I'll make one. Twist my arm. Okay, thanks for watching. Bye!